You're listening to episode 170, Courtney's Story, a daughter with Trisomy 21, AVSD and Pulmonary Hypertension. Hello, my friends. Welcome to Child Life on Call. This podcast is a safe place for parents to share their stories about what it's like to have a child that has a medical experience, diagnosis, disease, and or everything in between. We know there's power in sharing stories, and that power multiplies when you can listen to other parents who have walked a similar path to yours. Giving and getting advice is great, but hearing how another parent navigates the complexities and nuances of healthcare is even better. As a child life specialist, my role is to support, validate, and provide emotionally safe spaces for kids and their families, and I am so honored to be on this journey with you. In addition to parent stories, we sprinkle in some expert episodes every now and again that have content for both parents and professionals in the field of healthcare, all with the mission to empower parents to be confident advocates and partners with the care team during healthcare experiences. We're so glad you're here. Hello, my friends. This was such a beautiful conversation and was one of those ones where I sit back and think, oh my gosh, I cannot believe I get to do that. Hi, I am Katie. I am a certified child life specialist, and I am your host of Child Life on Call. I cannot believe we have been doing this podcast for 6 years, 7 years. I don't know. I'm bad at math, but it has been such a long time and such a beautiful gift and resource library for parents who are going through all kinds of challenges navigating their child's healthcare journey. And my conversation with Courtney felt like I was talking to a friend that I had known my entire life. And not just a friend that, I don't know, we just really connected so easily, but it was one of those friends that you know you can have hard conversations with and get through on the other end. And I don't know about you guys, but like the more I just admit to messing up all the time, the easier my life gets. It's when like I try to hold it together and act like, no, everything's fine, or I don't need to be told to change. Like that's when life gets hard. I'm reading this book right now. It's called Beyond Reality, or Bending Reality by Victoria Song. And she talks about contraction and expansion. And when we're in contraction, we feel just down about ourselves and we can't accept new information. And when we live in expansion, we are capable of anything. And when I approach conversations and discussions with people like Courtney in expansion, what comes out on the other side is just so beautiful. So thank you so much, Courtney, for being here today, for sharing your love of your child and of yourself. And what you're able to accomplish when you advocate for your daughter. It is truly, truly incredible, and I loved meeting you. Before we jump into the episode, I wanted to let you guys know that if you are a parent, a child life specialist, or professional working with children, you're going to want the hospital or physician's office or urgent care that you take your kids to have the Child Life On Call app. It is an evidence-based tool designed to empower children and families during medical experiences. And 100% of the child life specialists who have used this app believe that it can help with expanding child life's reach beyond the bedside. And 100% of child life specialists believe it helps parents feel more empowered in their child's care. Learn how to get the Child Life On Call app for your facility or doctor's office by going to childlifeoncall.com/partners.
My name is Courtney Morey. I live in Fort Worth, Texas with my family. My husband is Spencer, and we've been married for 8 years. And then our 5-year-old is Wells. He is about to start kindergarten in the fall. And Annie is 2.5. And yeah, we've been in Fort Worth for the majority of our marriage, and we really love it here.
Did you guys meet in college or after college? What's your love
So
story?
we did both go to the same college. We both went to TCU. We were even in the same, we're both in business school.
Okay.
And somehow we did not meet until a couple months after graduation.
That's so weird. That's so crazy.
It is weird because TCU is not a super big university.
Yeah.
And Spencer had a fro in college, so you would have thought that I would have remembered the guy with the fro, but
Too funny.
that's just how it was meant to be, I guess.
I guess I love that. Well, talk us kind of through the beginning of stages of we're going to be talking a little bit about your daughter Annie today and what your experience as being her awesome mom is like. And this is exciting for me to get to talk to you, Courtney, because we have been kind of in each other's emails for feels like a long time now. I love following you on social media. I love seeing Annie and Wells' sweet smiles and just everything about you. So, if you wouldn't mind just kind of taking us back to the beginning when you found out that something was going on.
Sure. We got a call from our OB's nurse when I was, gosh, I was 17 weeks pregnant, and she wanted me to find a time where we could set up a Zoom call with my doctor that day. And this was April of 2020. We were a month into the pandemic. So everything, is the very early stages of everything just being turned upside down. So I did not know what that meant, but I remember feeling really nervous. And so we set up my computer, and my OB called us, and he said that he was sorry that he had some news for us that the genetic testing had found, which that in itself was a surprise because I I didn't know that they were doing genetic testing. I with Wells, with our son, I had declined the NIPT test. And with Annie, I think because the office was just you know, just so off, they never even had a conversation with me about it. Obviously, I gave them my blood, but I had some stuff going on because of low iron, and my pregnancies are just really rough with low blood pressure. And so, yeah, basically that call was very surprising because that wasn't even on my radar
Mm.
that we would be having that sort of conversation. Um, and so it was a lot to take in. Um, I had to like get myself out of the monitor of the screen and just cry for a minute while Spencer talked to him and kind of gather myself. So the diagnosis was unexpected. It was, just a hard time in life for everyone at the, beginning of the pandemic in the middle of all that isolation. And I had this misconception that only women over the age of 35 have children with Down syndrome, which now I know is not true. And so as soon as we got off that call, I immediately, I just wanted to talk to Spencer one on one. And one of the biggest blessings of that entire day was all 4 years that Spencer was at TCU. He was very involved in the school that Annie now goes to. And so he had spent a lot of time at Kinder Frogs, which is a preschool specifically for children with Down syndrome. And so that was such a gift because he had firsthand experience and I had none. I mean, to the point where I I had so many basic questions of just what does Down syndrome mean?
Mm.
And so I really, really started with such little information. And from there, so the NIPT test told us that we had a 62% chance that our baby would have Down syndrome, and we still didn't know the gender. Our plan was to not find out the gender, just like we had done for Wells. But with time, we actually decided we do want to know if it's a boy or a girl because we wanted to name our baby. And so we found out Annie was a girl. That was very exciting. And went through with the amniocentesis because I felt like that 62% was sort of, closer to the middle. And
Yeah.
so we wanted to know and we wanted to prepare. And at the time of that test, we did the detailed anatomy scan, and that's where we found out about Annie's heart and that she would have AVSD. So, just pretty much right away, I just dove in trying to learn everything I could about Down syndrome, about the heart, and how to prepare for her to give her the best start as possible.
Mm. I that is pretty amazing that your husband had such um, deep experience, not just with one child that has Down syndrome, right, and having them in your life, but so many. And I was just interviewing another dad last week whose son has Down syndrome, and we talked very much like your experience that when we were growing up in school, children who had any kind of difference were typically kept outside the normal classroom. And
Right.
this integration didn't necessarily exist. Like, I think it's starting to today, and there's still a lot of work to go. But it's true, so many parents get a diagnosis and either have misconceptions or no idea. And you're starting on such a big learning curve. And I'm sure now people talk to you and they're like, "Are you a doctor or are you a nurse?" Like you know so much about cardiac conditions and about what Annie's sensory needs are and what works really well for her. It's amazing how what your brain can end up learning and handling when you're going through such a steep learning curve.
It is. It is. I I feel like I get asked that question a lot. Am I a nurse or medical, or what is my background? And there's no, I mean, the love that you have for your child, is what fuels that desire to dig in and to learn, at least in my experience. That's how it was, more than any desire I had in college
Mm.
going through business school, so it's just different. It's a whole different level. And I think because of what we went through with Annie, it was such an intense experience. I That was sort of how I coped, was
Mm.
taking in as much information as I could and really taking my role as her mom very seriously. And I don't know that that's necessarily the norm in situations like that, where I say that because I remember in the mornings during rounds in the CICU, a lot of the doctors would look at me like, "Who is this lady?" Like, "Oh, that's the mom." Because I was like,
Wow.
"Oh, actually, no, that she's right, but this has happened since." Or, "No, we did that x-ray and it actually showed this," and um, the staff was so incredible that they appreciated that. And I felt valued in my role. And that was all I could do for her at the time because she was so fragile. I couldn't do a lot of the typical mothering things. I couldn't hold her, I couldn't dress her, all those things that other moms of 4-month olds were doing. And so I just rechanneled my energy into um, into that role.
Mm. Thank you for sharing so honestly that stepping into a mothering role when you're kind of thrust into a new situation um, cannot be as dreamy as you envision it to be. Were there any times that you did feel like mom when you were in the NICU that you were like, oh, this is that feeling I want to capture? Um, did you enjoy the care tasks of changing diapers and having to do vital signs? Like, what were some of the things you looked forward to in the NICU?
So our time, okay, Annie was born at 37 plus 4, and that was because we were at our routine MFM appointment and they, were doing our extensive monitoring, and they saw that the umbilical flow had stopped. And this is something that I was very hyper aware of that could happen because of joining the DSD and pregnancy groups and learning from other mothers what, as you near the time of delivery, questions to ask. And I can remember my MFM being like, kind of looking at me like, how did you know that, that could happen? And that was really the early stages of realizing how much power there is in collective experience. And so I always attribute so much of my early, just that passion, that spirit to connecting with other moms before I even met Annie. And so, all that to say, to get back on track, Annie was born at 37 plus 4 because I was induced. And you never know. There's no predicting what's going to happen at birth, but we knew because of her heart, we could be in the NICU for a very long time. It could be all the way up until the time of her surgery. And I knew that open heart surgery, the goal was 4 months at the earliest, 6 months more ideally. And so when we were only in the NICU for 9 days, we were elated. It was like, oh my gosh, this is, it's all about perspective because
Yeah.
any other mother giving birth, if you have a 9-day NICU stay, it can totally rock your world. But because we knew that could have been so much more, we were so grateful. I mean, my delivery was so smooth with Annie. And I got to hold her for like 30 seconds, and I knew that wasn't guaranteed. I know so many mom friends who's, they don't get that moment. I didn't have to have a C-section. I got to have her vaginally. That was a huge gift, because, they warned me if, things get complicated, we will have to take her by cesarean. And I said, absolutely, whatever we have to do to keep both of us safe. So her delivery and her NICU time was actually really just a really joyful experience. And we were spending those 9 days just getting her off the NG tube. Annie saved all of her drama for her post open heart surgery. And that was where we spent, the months and months. And her repair just, it didn't go how, the textbook AVSD repair. And it's because hers was just so unbalanced and not the typical. I've learned that no two hearts are the same. You can have 100 babies with the same heart defect, and they're all going to be different.
Yeah.
And so that was a big lesson for me. I thought it was just going to be like all of our other friends, expect 5 to 14 days in recovery.
Right.
But that's not how it went for us. So,
And how old was she when she finally had that surgery?
so she was 4 months old.
She was 4 months.
She hit the weight, the minimum weight requirement. And just because she was in such heart failure, it's such a fine line and such a balance of deciding how long do we wait. We want the baby to grow, but ironically, the more time that passes, the weaker they become, the harder the feeding is. And so we had a cath, a heart cath, a couple days before Christmas, and that's when they decided that we need to do this now. And then her surgery was in January.
What really helped you when you were navigating the post-surgery really trauma, right, of this prolonged hospitalization after surgery and setbacks? What do you think helped you the most? I love what you said. You said collective feedback. Gosh, it's just so important. I for some reason I haven't heard that though it put that way, but it makes so much sense that hearing other parent stories, being able to DM, find them on Facebook, just getting bits and pieces of other people's experiences so that you can be prepared. Um, I love that, the way that you put that. Did that continue to help you when you were in the hospital too?
Yes. So those friendships that I had made in the pregnancy support groups, and I want to add quickly, I never wanted to be in, like, I remember my initial introduction to this whole Down syndrome community was me searching the hashtag Trisomy 21 Down syndrome on Instagram, finding moms. I never Googled once. I just refused because I knew the path that would open up, and I didn't want to do that. And so I wanted real life experience, which, because of social media, that's really how it is now, that it's really shifted to that for so many families. That real day-to-day life look, that is a true picture, not what Google says. So I reached out to this mom and asked her for advice, and she said, you should really join this Facebook support group. And just the word support group sounded so, like, I joke with my mom friends, I pictured these just haggard moms who were just, and like, it's so funny because that's not at all how it is. And last May, we took a mom's trip to Florida and we're just on the beach, like, just like the most beautiful setting, the most beautiful friendships. And we were just joking about what haggard moms we were. um, but anyways, the support group is where that, like I said, I learned so much from the very beginning, and those friendships beyond carried me when Annie. So what happened, because I feel like that's kind of important to know to answer your question about support and what carried me through. Annie had a really hard time coming off of bypass once her heart was repaired. This had nothing to do with the surgery itself, like, it was a perfect anatomical repair, but pulmonary hypertension, which is something that I'm now extremely passionate about, supporting research, because it's something that's so not well understood. And that the pulmonary hypertension is what almost took Annie from us. So she coded, and she had to be resuscitated for 52 minutes. Mm. And I mean, that the details of that could be a long story in itself, but it's what gave us that unexpected long CICU stay. And Annie had to go on a machine I had never heard of before called ECMO. And for those not familiar with ECMO, that's a good thing. But it's essentially, she's already intubated. So I think a lot of people think of life support as being on a ventilator, but this is even a step beyond. This is a machine that completely bypasses the heart and lungs, and the machine is your heart and lungs. And the purpose for that is to allow the heart to rest. And that's exactly what Annie needed. Her heart just went into shock after the repair, and that pulmonary hypertension was just wreaking havoc. And so the ECMO machine is such a valuable tool, but it's also terrifying at the same time, because you're constantly at risk for the blood clotting. And so Annie was on that machine for 9 days. And the whole time, I mean, an entire separate team monitors that machine, and it's just so intense. And so, yeah, it was 9 days of not being able to we couldn't even touch her. Like, that's how delicate she was. And And that kind of ties back into my rabbit trail of having to just make myself useful in other ways, because there was no changing diapers. There was no, like I would like clip a little bow in her hair and that was it. I would play music. I would, pray, and that was all I could do.
We'll be right back. I am so excited to share today's product with you. This is not a paid sponsor or a paid ad, just true love from our guest today sharing one of her favorite products. So if you are a parent of a child with a medical device or are someone who's tired of feeling limited by your child's medical equipment, Spoonie Threads understands your frustration and is here to help. Founded by Dr. Julie Sanchez, a pediatric surgeon, Spoonie Threads offers functional fashion to provide independence, confidence, and freedom to those who feel constrained by their medical devices. The idea for Spoonie Threads came from a mom whose child needed a G-tube, and after talking to many patients and her families, Dr. Sanchez realized that medical devices were negatively impacting their daily lives. They want to be a voice for inclusivity, individuality, and community. So if you're tired of feeling limited by your medical equipment or your child's medical equipment, check out Spoonie Threads. They have a variety of functional and fashionable options that will help you feel confident and independent. Join their community and embrace your individuality with Spoonie Threads. Find out everything you need and more at spooniethreads.com. That's SPOONIE threads, THREADS.com. Thank you for sharing that. I agree. The ECMO machine is so terrifying. There's someone who stays with it 24/7. There's a whole dedicated profession to it called a perfusionist whose whole role is to run the ECMO machine. That's really scary.
It was, of course, it's not like when you're in pre-op visits, cardiologists aren't like, and also in the worst case scenario, there's something called ECMO, and like you don't do that. So when you're put in a situation, it's totally just, you're just under fire of trying to wrap your head around what it is. Our team was just so amazing. The intensivists in that unit, just top of the line, her surgeon, just incredible people. So to circle back to your question, how did we survive that? It really is a combination of so many things. Having full trust in her medical care, the intensivist, the surgeon, the nurses, like all around. I never had to worry about that part of it. I felt very extremely solid. My marriage, I don't know what the statistics are of couples who go through things like this, a diagnosis, let alone, medical on top, but I know it's not great. But we just, ironically, it's some of my proudest moments with my husband because we just had each other. And I'm so grateful for that, because it would have been real easy to go the total opposite direction. But Annie just pulled us closer to each other. And then those friendships that we mentioned, not a lot of my other mom friends or college friends or childhood friends could really understand what we were going through. But because I had this group who were heart moms or, had spent time in the NICU or other experiences, they were just a constant there, sending things for us, checking in. I mean, just all kinds of support they almost, just kept me so busy. I couldn't just sit and wallow in the sadness. And I think for my personality type, that was best. Um, then a big outlet for me was sharing updates about Annie's health. I would, be very present in those rounds in the mornings and try to take in as much information. And then I would write and translate that information. So it helped me to have a better grasp on what they were saying to then share an update. And that was that was a that worked well for me. And of course, sharing Annie's story opened up this entire unexpected social media platform that I never what had happened was I opened my account to public so that friends and family could share. And then it was just like kept spreading and spreading. And soon it was like I was advocating for children with Down syndrome and heart babies. And I never even, I didn't really ask for it. But then I saw what a beautiful thing it was, the most incredible private messages of people sending me, how Annie's story had made a really big impact on their own life. And yeah, so there was a lot of beauty in that. And that really filled me up when I felt so depleted. I think that just about covers it.
You portray such a level of vulnerability that's coupled with this really directness, which is so beautiful. Oh, just listening to you talk. So I thank you for sharing those, because I think it's not always one thing, and never once did you say self-care, right? It's like, that doesn't do it. I'm so over that term. But it's relying on the people you love and being vulnerable enough to do that when you're in your scariest moment has got to be just the next scariest thing, to give your heart open to somebody else, like your husband or your new friendships.
Yeah, they're having the phrase self-care in a situation like that. I mean, I think the most self-care was making sure I ate,
Right.
like turning my phone off and actually sleeping when I could. But I mean, I was sleeping next to Annie, like her room was at the very front of the unit with all lights typically on, and the amount of machines and medications, like it was, just survival mode. But yeah, like having my morning coffee felt like a huge self-care. But friends did. Like I had friends like, you need to make sure your immune system is being supported. I'm going to bring you blah, blah, blah. And it was like, oh my gosh, thank you so much. Because that is the last thing on my list. And because those friends did that for me, it's something I'll never forget. And now our community is just so tight knit. And now there's so many moms I've connected with at our children's hospital. Like right now, there's 3 in the NICU and 1 in the CICU. And, doing the same for them, bringing them like a fresh pressed juice or, different things to make sure that they're getting something healthy is now at the top of my list. So it's just that theme of other moms like planted these seeds, and now I just want to, keep doing the same as much as possible. And then I think it's just this really healthy, positive cycle that I hope will just keep spreading.
I think there's no doubt that what you put out into the world, whether it's a direct juice that you send somebody or you just being you, and sharing this is having a profound impact on so many people, regardless of what diagnosis they may have in their family or expect to have.
Right.
I'm so interested in you. I want to tell you something that when you filled out my form, I have an intake form,
Mhm.
and I pride myself on like being really aware of language. And I said something.
Oh, yes.
I said, what were and are the hardest parts? And actually, I said for dealing with a child who has this diagnosis. And you so um, kindly, you said it gives a negative connotation when you say dealing with. And I want to thank you for that because I think it's so important for me, who has a podcast, professionals who work with families on a daily basis. We can just so quickly kind of go about these things. And when people kindly and lovingly and honestly share feedback that just makes better communication and more people feel loved and heard and cared for was your suggestion. So you had me change it to you suggested it could be what were and are the hardest parts of caring for a child. Absolutely. That it makes me so embarrassed that I even had it the first way to begin with. Um I don't I just don't want you to ever lose that. That is so important when you're speaking with medical providers. I know it's not your job to have to do that, to have to like you have so many other things on your mind when you're talking to the doctor. You have things you want to accomplish. That feedback is so necessary for us to continue to grow and learn. And so I'm so grateful for that. And I've had another parent suggest kindly too, like maybe you could word something this way. Gosh, that's all. I'm hungry for that kind of feedback. So I just want to thank you for that.
Well, I
Um,
had totally forgotten about that because I filled out the questionnaire
yeah.
months and months ago, and because of our family, schedule, and I can't remember the specifics of what delayed our interview the first and second time, but I'd forgotten about that, and that it means just as much to me because if feedback isn't received, on y'all's end, then it's out of our control. All we can do is, try and try to do it in a way that is, humble and gracious. But I'll tell you, it's not like the way you just responded to that isn't isn't how it always goes.
Yeah.
And I'm just really encouraged right now because, gosh, there's been a lot the last several months in advocating in the medical setting that I don't always get to share on social media because it's just not really possible or necessarily in Annie's best interest at this time. But it can be it can really beat a mom down. And I'm so happy that we can have this dialogue so other moms can be encouraged, like the way I'm encouraged right now, that there are people like you who are hungry for that and want to change that. And yes, there are going to be those who, you know, act the exact opposite, but how amazing for those who want to work with us. And if we don't try, then, we'll never know. But that means
Yeah.
so much to me. So thank you. I'd
Oh my
totally
gosh.
forgotten.
I'm so glad. I try to when I'm working with a family in the hospital, like it makes complete sense that you don't want to have to fight another fight, right? When you're there. And
Correct.
if you can find a child life specialist, a social worker, that nurse who like you just vibing with and be like, I don't have the bandwidth to tell the last EEG tech that they were SHIT. I need you
Hmm.
to help me do this fight. Like,
Hmm.
rely on us too to help with some of that advocacy. It can't always fall on your shoulders. Um, and we are so used to it. Like, we're so used to to advocating, and that's some of the things we want to help take off your plate too. So I hope that you and other moms who are listening, like you've got people in the hospital looking out for you. And yeah, it's sad that some people don't want to receive it in that way. And I think that's probably personality in a lot of ways, but it's not okay. So just keep practicing it,
Yeah, it's such a long game, I'm truly in the middle of it. And every day I have to tell myself, like, I've got to pace myself because it's, Annie's 2. We have a long ways to go.
Yeah. It makes me, okay, I'm so curious about you because you're ambitious. You have a degree in business. You're advocating all the time. What have you learned about yourself that maybe has surprised you, or have you not been surprised? Have you shown up in a way that makes sense to who you were before Annie was born?
I think that when we got Annie's diagnosis, like that night, I remember, gosh, I don't even think I can say this without crying, but I remember asking God, or like I remember the statistic of 1 in 700, and I pictured this like giant, that game on Price is Right where someone stands at the top and it's like, I think it's called Plinko or something like that, and it goes all it. And I just imagined that there were 700 and that like ours landed in the 1. And I remember like that was my visual. And I remember being like, God, like, why? What have I done to deserve this? Which really pains me to say that out loud. But I know that there are probably other moms who just got a diagnosis and who identify with that. And then, how quickly my mindset changed. And when we didn't know if Annie was going to make it or not, I can just remember holding her for the first time once she finally got off the ventilator, where I could hold her 2 weeks later. And I remember asking the same exact question. What have I done to deserve her? What have I done to deserve this? But just with the total opposite tone, because she's so precious to me. And when I graduated from college, I did not have a lot of clear direction. Like when Spencer graduated, he was actually in Ohio when we started dating because he was on this very like clear path in medical device sales, and he was just like the picture perfect student. And I was also a good student. I just didn't know what was next for me. And when we got married and moved to Houston, I worked in adoption actually. And what does that have to do with business school? But when I saw that opportunity, I was like, this is my dream job. And I worked with birth moms. And then when we moved back to Fort Worth, I worked actually for TCU in admissions because it was a flexible job with being a new mom. And all that time, I just never really I remember having these thoughts of like, well, but I didn't really use my business degree the way like everyone else did, and the way I see my husband doing it. And I always just had this ping of like doubt and did I do the wrong thing? And the last thing I expected was getting a diagnosis and like in motherhood to like set me straight and to see my purpose. But those skills that I learned in school, and the networking skills that I learned, and the connections I made, and I mean my husband, like I wouldn't have met my husband otherwise. And just so much of that. Now I look back and I see, because so much of what I want to do now, the advocacy and the, you know, my hopes and dreams of what I want to do for not just children with Down syndrome, but tons of diagnoses, just supporting medical parenthood. I couldn't have done that if not for my background and my education. And Annie just, she, she, she like, I don't feel that, I don't feel that pull anymore. I don't feel that uneasiness. I just feel like, okay, this makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
I was meant to be her mom. And it's just, I really do feel so fulfilled. And maybe to a lot of people that doesn't make sense, because the world says that people with Down syndrome have less value and they can't do this and they won't do this. And I just, I knew nothing about Down syndrome 3 years ago. And yet, because I love my child unconditionally, here I am. And yeah, I just, I feel purpose and I feel peace.
Yeah, you're exactly where you're supposed to be. I have just a couple more questions, but I'm so curious. What are your hopes and dreams? Like, what is your vision? I call this like gap filling, right? Like you see a gap and you go fill it. And I love gap fillers. So what is yours?
I have a list that is it's become a joke with me and my best mom friends. It's like something else comes up and it's like, add it to the list, add it to the list.
Yeah.
But we have officially, we have 501c3 status and like a tax ID number for a foundation in Annie's name.
Congratulations.
And pretty much what I said, like, I have connected with so many families, and it's not just Down syndrome. It's, maybe their child also has a heart defect, but they're neurotypical, or maybe their baby just has an oral aversion and is struggling with feeding, like we went through, or maybe their baby just has hypothyroidism. There's all these things that create commonalities. And so, like at the very base of it, it's because Annie has Down syndrome, but it's just connected to so much more. And so what I have found is that there is no one place for a family to go to for just like a resource hub of information. It's out there, but will a parent even find it? Maybe. Does that parent have time after the, typical motherhood plus their career plus, therapy plus medical appointments? No, our time is so limited and it's so precious. And so basically Instagram just isn't cutting it. It's not a platform. It's a wonderful platform in that it helps us show our day to day. I can connect with people, but basically I realized there needs to be a website that is a resource hub that has all the things on it in one place. And it's going to look like video information. It's going to look like a blog. It's going to look like a lot of links to a lot of different things. And so that's what I've started on. I've just, like, the past month really started digging in on getting it all started. So,
well, I know that anyone listening right now is ready for you to create it, and however we can support you. And just, we love giving parents as many resources as possible. And if you can condense it into one place, man, we want to support you. So let us know. My last question for you is, tell us a little bit about like 2-year-old Annie. Like, what is she like? Like, what makes her laugh? Like, what does
Yeah,
your
this is the
family
best
do?
part.
It's the best question. That's why I save it for last. Tell us, like, when you guys are doing family things, like, what fills you up?
So Annie's personality is really big. She, there's like a phrase in the Down syndrome community, more alike than different. And I see that every single day with my children. She is like so much like Wells at 2.5 years old, but she has like this layer of sass to her that he didn't have, which is fun for me as a girl mom. I actually remember being in the CICU and Annie did something and the nurse said, "Oh, she's sassy." And I just like paused and I was like, "No, I'm gonna have like this sweet daughter, not sassy." And she was like, "Courtney, she has to be sassy to survive this." And I was like, "Whoa, you're right. Okay, Annie, you're probably gonna be pretty sassy." And she's just the best combination of sweet and sassy. And she's very animated. I mean, she just makes us laugh all day, just like her brother makes us laugh so much. She just started walking consistently the last 2 weeks. So that's been obviously very exciting in our world because of all the hours and hours and hours of PT, like time with the PT that we put into. But it's like, oh yeah, now I have it, just like typical motherhood, they're mobile. Now I've got to go keep up with them. So
Right.
that's been new and fun. Um, she, I love seeing her interact with just strangers out in public. Someone who is just, obviously very like serious and in their zone and whatever they're doing. And then Annie will start talking to them. Hi, and they immediately just smile and laugh, and it's just she just pulls people in, and we knew it was probably going to be like that, and it started. And it sometimes it opens up the opportunity for conversations, and she just keeps life so, like, it's hard to lose perspective because she's constantly keeping us in line about what's important and what's not important. And she just keeps things really fun. So, like, yes, in Annie's story, we've had a lot of, medical hardship. That's true. Like, I'm not going to sugarcoat that. But she also has come so far. I mean, we came home from her open heart surgery on 12 medications. Annie is on one medication right now.
Wow.
So it's like once you've been through so much of the
Mm.
hard, you can never not appreciate, just the typical. So yeah, she's just life is just better with Annie.
Mm. Well, thank you so much for sharing a little bit of her with us and you with us, and just being the woman and the mom that you are. I'm so grateful to finally get to talk with you, and just want to thank you for being on the podcast.
Thank you so much for having me, and I'm glad that we got to do this finally.
Me too. Thank you all so much for listening to Child Life on Call. If you head to our website, childlifeoncall.com, you're going to find all sorts of stuff there for parents, professionals, healthcare providers, child life specialists, no matter who you are. Actually, when you just go to our homepage, it'll help you direct to exactly where you need to go. On that, you'll find opportunities and PDUs for child life specialists. Parents, we've got a starter kit for you. And clinicians, we even have a clinician course, which teaches you how to be a confident and capable caregiver in pediatrics. We're so grateful that you're here. Please DM us on Instagram. And like I mentioned, when you rate and review this podcast, it helps other families be able to find us. So let's keep doing that. And I will see you again here next week.